Hoodoo plant mamas, get your soul fed and your spirit read.
This here ain't no trend. I possess the power from way back when folk were stripped from all of their kin, so they had to find the magic within. So I call on my ancestors and gather my herbs. I conjure at my altar. Hoodoo plant mama. I manifest growth and I release trauma.
Child, we just out here trying to water our plants and mind our business, you know? Everybody here from the deep south, man. Everybody can have culture like us.
Hey y'all, and welcome back to another episode of Hoodoo Plant Mamas. I'm your host, Leah Nicole,
And I'm Danny B.
and today we are talking about children, specifically Black children. So before we get started, Danny B, how are you doing?
Child, I'm doing terrible. I'm tired, okay? I'm in the middle of finals week. But you know what? I started my morning off nice. My friend texted me at like seven this morning. I just happened to be woke, of course, doom scrolling through Instagram. And we went and got breakfast. So
Ooh.
that was good. I finished most of one of my finals. I just have to tweak some things and edit. But then I have two more finals left, two more papers. So yeah, I just got to get through that. That's how I'm doing. We got to be honest. Like, don't be talking about you doing all right when you doing terrible. Just say it. Let's normalize just telling the truth about it.
Well, I wouldn't say I'm doing terrible, but I have been pretty exhausted this past week. And I think for me, I'm like, where is my time going and how can I get it back to myself? Because I'm like, I'm unemployed. I should not be waking up, working until I go to bed. I'm like, I should have free time. But yes, I'm trying to figure that out. But today has been a better day. Right before this, I had a writing accountability group where we check in with each other. And so, because none of us met our writing goals for the month, we decided to start writing on some projects that we were working on. So, I'm almost finished with the first revision of my book, what I had planned to finish back in January, but I have not done it. But yeah, I'm very happy about that. So, gratitude. What are you grateful for right now?
I don't know if you know the singer Duran Bernard. Bernard, I'm adding the extra D.
No.
He has like one of the best falsettos in the world, one of the best voices in the world. So I'm thankful for his just music. Anything that he's on is gold to me, and it just makes me feel at peace. And then, man, I'm thankful for the light at the end of the tunnel. Like, I see it, so um, I know that I can do it. I'm keeping faith that everything's gonna be okay. I'm sorry, I'm just coming in here all dark. I can't even be like good at the gratitude moment. I'm thankful to be here. I'm thankful for music, and I'm thankful for my friends. My friends have been keeping me. So amen to that.
Amen. Um, I am grateful for Black hairstylists. Ever since
Mm.
I want to say it was Camille Janae who did that TikTok on Twitter that broke the internet. It's just like, because I remember at that time I was not washing my hair. It was just another thing that I had to deal with. And the fact that all of these hairstylists were like, it does not have to be this hard. You can have like good hair days and it'd be a lot easier and a lot cheaper. And they were right. I'm like, thank God. Thank God. So I'm grateful that they are out here arguing with people on the internet about Black hair care does not have to be hard.
Amen. Listen, not you reminding me I need to wash my hair that I've been. I think I need to wash it more often than I'd like, but we had
Yeah,
this conversation.
yeah.
I'm just gonna have to do it.
When I first started the detox, I think I washed my hair 3 times in 2 weeks.
I hate it.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. But my hair got a lot better. That's
And I
it.
don't even really got nothing to complain about. I don't even got a lot of hair. This is just pure laziness. So, um, all right. Well, let's get started with the show. The first thing we wanted to talk about, well, I wanted to talk about especially was childhood experiences with like spirits and death. So like maybe a week or so ago on Twitter, I was about to start this rant. I think I deleted it. But I was talking about how I think most of us were our mediums, but it got suppressed in childhood. And I was thinking about these things that we talk about even now with kids having imaginary friends, or I don't know if y'all heard that saying that they used to say that like babies can see ain't well some old folks say oh babies be seeing angels,
Hmm.
but I think they be seeing ghosts. And if you've ever been around a baby, they are weird. Like they be pointing at stuff and you like, what you pointing at, smiling? It's so I kind of want to talk about like um how our most like spiritual and intuitive like aspects of ourselves kind of get suppressed in childhood. Because even I also want to mention like even in school, I don't know if you grew up, we talked a little bit about this on our conspiracy theory episode, but in school we used to be sitting around talking about ghosts or like things we seen or thought we seen, something we heard in the night, or what we heard, what our grandmama or mama told us about what they saw, just kind of passing on these like um ghost stories just casually. um so I just wanted to talk about like how parents, guardians, people who love us suppress this, and also try to kind of pathologize it too. Like they'll try to make it like something was wrong with the kid if they keep saying they got imaginary friend for too long, when it's like,
Hmm.
nah, you really the problem. Listen to the kid. But what do you think about that, Leah? Like, do you have any memorable experiences seeing ghosts as a child, or even feeling like something's there that you can't see as a kid?
Um, I would say yes, but I wouldn't think it was like ghosts or spirits. I remember in our God and Nature episode, I talked about, just being out in the woods, talking and having answers come to me. So it felt very much like I was talking to something. But I didn't know what it was. But I will say that my nephew, he's 10 right now, and ever since he was little, he's always been like very afraid of things because he says he sees shadows and stuff. And even now he's still saying he sees shadows. So I like we suspected that my nephew may be someone who can like see dead people, but I don't think he likes that he can do that. Um but yeah, I think so far that may be the only experience that I've had. I know like my niece and my nephews, when they were younger, they were the kinds to like look at things and smile or laugh. And me, I'm scary. I'm like, what you looking at back there? I'm like, I'm glad I can't see it. And even I know we're talking about kids, but even my cat will do that sometimes. She'll be like looking at stuff and mowing, and I'm like, no, what's up there?
Animals too, they do it too. Um, your nephew, if he doesn't like it and doesn't have, I guess you could try to guide him, but some people just don't want to do that, and that's okay. Then it'll probably become distant, like a distant gift or something as he
Hmm.
gets older if he completely rejects it. But one of my earliest memories, I will never forget this. I was standing in the kitchen with my mama, and I don't even remember what she was doing. A part of me is like, was she hot combing my hair? Was she fixing she was doing something where I had to be still and wait a minute until she finished what she was doing with me. And I was looking toward her back bedroom, and for a second there was a man in like a full suit and a hat, like a top hat. Black man, older black man. He was there for a minute, and I jumped, and my mama said, "What's wrong with you?" And I was too scared to tell her. I just said, "Nothing, nothing." Now, context for this is that this is context after the fact, because I've thought for years and years and years and years, mind you, this is about 20 years ago. I was like what, 8 or 9. And at first I thought it was my uncle that I knew very well as a kid. Then I realized that the house that we were living in, my stepdad at the time, he grew up in that house. If I'm not mistaken, his granddaddy lived in that house. Like his parents lived in that house. And so after a while, I was like, nah, I actually think that that was my stepdaddy's granddaddy. And now I got a whole theory about that that I'm probably gonna write some kind of creepy story about. Cause I'm like, nah, this man been up in that house the whole time. And this explains a lot. Um, but there was also another incident while I was still in Chicago. And I had a cousin that died very tragically in a motorcycle accident. And um he was grown. And I was walking from the store. I don't know if I was probably with my daddy. I feel like I was, that don't matter. Whoever I was with was grown. And this guy rode back on a bike and I was staring at him because I felt like he had my cousin's face. And then he winked at me. And then the whole time, you a little kid, I kept thinking, oh my gosh, was that Junior? I never would tell people this. Like, I never told them when those kind of things happen. I just stared at him because I was like, nah, he had my cousin face. Like, was that him? Was that him? And then there's been like other things with like feelings, just having a feeling. But I'm scary. So I'm sure
Same.
whatever that was, I feel like now I'm becoming more open and I can feel it. Like I can feel like, girl, it's just a matter of time. Them spirits feel it. They like, she coming back. It's just a matter of time for you see something and you're gonna fall out. Because right now I'm more, I think it's because I'm much more spiritually aware now that like now, even if I'm trying to suppress it, I can't. So yeah, not to get on a rant, but yeah, those are some of my memorable experiences.
No, I was like, I'll probably fall out if I saw some.
I was so young though. That's the thing. I don't know. Do you remember just being less? I don't know how to describe it, but as a kid, you're so full of wonder. And I,
Mhm.
I started thinking about that a lot more. A nature poet I really like talks about this in a collection of essays she wrote, but like as a kid, you are like so curious. So it's less fear and more curiousness until people socialize you into being like, you're not allowed to ask questions. You could get in trouble if you ask this question. Like, we
Mhm.
put the fear of, how they always say curiosity killed the cat.
Mhm.
Like, why I had to kill the cat? Like, maybe whatever killed the cat is the problem and not the curiosity. But you tell kids that, and then they think it's wrong to be curious about things and to wonder like, oh, what does that do? I wonder if this exists, that kind of thing. And I want to get back to that. I admire that in children, like just being so amazed about everything and having so many questions about stuff. So,
Yeah, I volunteer in my community, so I mentor a couple of black girls, and something that they're teaching me a lot of is playing. Like that's something we don't do a lot as adults, just playing and having fun and not worrying. I'm like, wow, amazing.
yes, they do. They teach you the art of just like being in the moment.
Mhm.
Um, but so yeah, so I also want to like mention like some people grow up and they're able to keep their mediumship abilities. I remember when I first started learning about particularly African spiritual practices and meeting people who had those gifts and people telling their story. And I used to be like thinking, oh, something wrong with me because I'm not like them and da 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 da. But then also, some of these people just had like either people in their life that nurtured their gifts or that was just a part of their destiny because some people just weren't able to get away from it. Like, so while some of us suppressed it, some people just couldn't, and that's just a part of their experience. And some of those people are actually um doing spiritual work with those gifts. But I want to talk about like What do you think really impacts our disconnect from the spiritual realm, like in childhood and as we grow up? Because I was thinking about the medium depictions of ghosts and spirits, especially of anything that got to do with African spirituality, of
Mhm.
course. Um, Church. So I remember I got into an argument. I was a teenager. Yes, I did used to argue with my grandma because my grandma was like my mama, and y'all used to argue with y'all mamas too. So hush. Um, and we were talking about ghosts, and I think she got mad because I was like, "Well, how does it make sense to believe in God and not spirits?" Because I think she was trying to insinuate that ghosts weren't real or something. And she got so mad, like, because I guess it was me challenging her authority, but also maybe I was challenging God, and I wasn't. To me, it's like, how you talking about the Holy Spirit and Jesus rise from the dead, but the idea of ghosts is like where you draw the line. That's like, I'm just saying, like, you gotta make it make sense for me, Granny. Okay,
And some people call it the Holy Ghost.
you know, when we was in church learning about that, I was like, oh, so there's a spirit and then there's a person. So me as a kid, I was trying to put two and three together. And it wasn't coming out to be five. It was coming out to be something else. So yeah, I remember when I started asking those questions and it was not met well. I was a teenager by then, and I was bold enough to say it, but even then it wasn't met well. So, what did it for you? If you feel like, or do you feel like you never really stopped believing or whatever?
Um, I would say I never really stopped believing because I think even for me, spirituality was a bit of escapism. So, I could always go outside and sit down in the forest and just talk or whatever. But something else I think that causes that disconnect is kind of the way we treat children and the way we don't believe them. Like you said earlier about having imaginary friends, like after a while people are like, "Okay, you're too old to deal with that," because we don't believe that, anything the fact that we even call them imaginary, like we believe that it doesn't exist or it's not real because a child came up with it. Part of that disconnect comes from the way we don't value what children have to say or believe. And then it's also is TV. Because I remember, well, I grew up with a mama who's like really into sci-fi and fantasy, so we watched a lot of supernatural type stuff. And she believes in ghosts. Pretty much my whole family believes in like ghosts and spirits. They also believe that the dead can come back and, give you messages or see you or something like that. So it's very hoodoo, even though if you ask them, they would say it wasn't. Um, so I think TV, but then I also did have a family that believed in these things. So,
I had people in my family that did. My grandma is, I think it's because she moved away. She went to college, she moved away, and like was very I don't know. That's a whole nother thing. But my aunts and stuff, that's really who I learned a lot from. They were like being around especially my aunts that never left the South. The stories that they told, the things that I remember overhearing, and then talking to my friends that I grew up with. Um, that's really what kept me like I never stopped believing either, but I knew that like I couldn't tell nobody if I saw something or if I felt this way because they wasn't gonna believe me. I could only tell
mhm.
my friends. And so my friends had some very strange stories that still hunt me. And I believed them. We was kids. We didn't have no reason to make it up. I mean, yes, make up shit. But nah, I believe most of it actually happened. Um, well, one of the things, because I think it's all connected too, was like, how did you view death as a kid? Like, because I don't know. I just think that I was bound to get into some weird shit as I got older because I was, so I still remember the first dead person I touched in a casket. It was my great great grandmother. I was very young, maybe like 5 or 6, and I was with my great. It was my great grandfather's mother, and obviously she had him super young because you know, the fact that she was still alive and he was alive. But we walked up to the casket and I was so curious because I always wondered if they was gonna get up. That was my thing. I always was looking for the breathing. Like I was like, and I always wanted to touch them. And I was like, and he touched her hand. I was like, how does it feel? He was like, she's just cold. She's just cold. You want to touch it? And he told me to touch her. And it was so weird. And I remember I kept walking up to it and I was poking it because I was so curious. And then I thought I seen her blink, and I was like, I ain't going back up. She didn't. I think it was just my imagination, but I was like, oh hell no. Um, but I've never touched another dead person again. But that was my first time. And then I always felt weird at cemeteries. I always felt weird. I always felt like it's a lot of niggas out here. I don't see y'all. But I just felt like it's crowded out here. I can't even describe the feeling, but I know the feeling was like, it's a lot. It's a lot out here. I just feel like it's a lot of people out here, even though ain't nobody out here. But something still drew me to it. I won't get on a rant, but
Okay.
I've been weird for a long time. What about you?
I like that description, crowded, for a cemetery. That makes sense. I also had like weird feelings around a cemetery, but I think a lot of it was propaganda. And then also, we told each other ghost stories in school. So it was like the cemetery were where the ghosts were. And if you go at a certain time, they were going to get you. So I was like, I'm not going to.
Mm-hmm.
Not gonna be there. But as a kid, I'm not sure how I viewed death. I know that we had I think the first time something died was my dog had puppies and she sat on one and suffocated it. And so I was like trying to bring it. Yeah, I know. I was like 7. I was trying to bring it back to life, and one of my siblings, or maybe it was my mama, was like, "The dog's gone." And I'm like, and I was so upset I couldn't save it because, like, as she was laying down on it, the other puppies were feeding from her, so I was trying to pick her up, and she was too heavy. So yeah, it was sad that I couldn't save it, and I remember it wasn't that dog, but there was another puppy that was run over, and so I tried to bury it in our front yard right by the door. And my parents yelled at me. It was like, it's going to smell. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because I knew that you put dead things in the ground. That's all I knew about death. I don't think then I had a concept of an afterlife. Maybe I did, of heaven and hell, because we were in the Bible Belt. So maybe I had that in my head. But at funerals, I think the first funeral I went to, I don't know whose funeral it was. I saw my daddy getting dressed to go to church and he like never went to church. So I was like, where's he going? And my mom was like, you want to go with him? I was like, yeah. So I had to get dressed up and go. And he said it was my cousin, but I had no idea who that person was. I think it was a closed casket.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was older when my grandma died, and that was an open casket. And I remember my mama was like, "Oh, she just looks like she's sleeping." And I was like, "She doesn't look like she's sleeping."
Why does every black person say that? My
I
grandma
don't
tells
know.
me that every time she goes to a funeral, she just looked like she was asleep.
No.
Girl, no,
She
they
does
don't.
not look like she's sleeping. Or maybe it was the makeup or something. It just looked weird. I'm like, I don't like this.
Listen, some funeral homes be doing that makeup down, okay, but nah, they do not look like they sleep. So yeah, I didn't have any. Death was something I was very curious about. I didn't have any concept of the emotions of a funeral. So every time I went to a funeral and people was hollering, and I come from that family during a funeral, somebody gonna get dragged like down the middle of the aisle. It's gonna be a performance. And apparently this has been happening for years because we talked about it at Easter, and my grandma was talking about her aunties used to do that, like at a funeral on the front pew, and in the middle of them preaching, all of a sudden we'll start hollering like, "Oh, I love my sister. Oh, my sister." And so it's but I never understood, even for people that I knew, like I was super close to my great grandfather. And I remember the last time I seen him, he was actually on, I think when he passed away, that was around the time you could bring the person back home, if even if they was dying and they let them die in their home. I don't know if they still
Mm,
do that because he was
maybe. I
hooked
have
up
no
to
idea.
all kind of stuff. And I remember this was my first time seeing him where he couldn't talk to me. And I remember walking in there. This gonna sound like I'm lying, but I swear I'm not lying. Like I knew that he was gone already. And then the next day, they said that he had died. And I didn't feel anything because when I walked in the room, I did not feel that my granddaddy was there. This wasn't him. Like it was just like he was just there. And I remember touching his hand, and my grandma, his wife, my great grandma said, "You can talk to him, he can hear you." But I didn't want to talk to him because he just wasn't, that was my granddaddy and he wasn't saying anything. So I just touched his hand, but it just didn't feel the same. So I remember that I didn't, and I walked out, and we was driving. I think we got the call when we were on our way back to Mississippi or something. Yeah. So I just remember being intuitive about it, but it was also something I just didn't understand. Like why is
Mhm.
everybody screaming? Like I guess I didn't realize the forever aspect of it, or maybe I was too disconnected or something. Maybe I was too young, but yeah.
I agree. I don't wanna say I didn't understand grief, but I don't know, it didn't feel like death was final in that way that everyone else made it out to be.
I like that because I think that's the same way. It didn't feel final, and I have no idea why. I didn't have no context to why it should feel final. Because I loved my granddad. I still think about him, but I also feel like at this point, I think he been with me for a minute. Like I just think he been with me even when I didn't recognize it. And maybe that's why I never felt traumatized by his death. That was literally a prominent man figure in my life, like one of the few. And I just didn't feel like, but yeah, so I definitely think that's probably what it was for
Mhm.
sure. Well, should we take a break?
Yes, we could take a break.
All right. Today's episode is sponsored by Sun in Twelfth. Sun in Twelfth is a Black woman LGBT owned business that hosts courses curated exclusively for Black people by Hoodoo and astrologer Mariah Williams. Through a Hoodoo dip style of chart reading, Black people learn the foundation of Hoodoo concepts and principles, how to develop our ancestral practices, as well as how to read and better understand ourselves through our natal chart.
So, Mariah shared a bit of her class with us, and from what I can see, we share a lot of the same ideas concerning hoodoo. She does go a bit more in depth through this class, and there are weekly Q&A sessions where you can ask your most pressing questions. We know people have asked us questions about what are good offerings or how to set up their altar. This is a good course to sign up for if you want those questions answered. If you want to learn more about your chart, I highly recommend this course. Astrology is neither of our strong suits, but through this class, you'll have a good grasp about how to use your natal chart for your own personal development.
Registration for Astrology Through a Hoodoo Lens will be open until May 28th. Sign up by May 7th to receive $50 off. The course runs from May 30th to July 11th. For more information, check out sunintwelfth.com. That's SUNINTWELFTH.com.
So, thank you to today's sponsor. If you would like to sponsor an episode, you can email us at hoodooplantmamas@gmail.com. We especially want to work with Black, Indigenous, POC owned, and LGBTQ owned businesses.
Also, we have a new patron. Thank you, Rich, for joining our Patreon. We share exclusive spiritual content every month for only $5 a month if you'd like to join.
And thank you to Chantrice of Black Market Kentucky for hitting us up on Cash App. If you like to donate to our Cash App, it's hashtag Hoodoo Plant Mamas, or you can donate on our PayPal, which is hoodooplantmamas@gmail.com. Let's get back to the show. So we're back and we wanted to talk about making space for Black children. So for those of you tapped into Hoodoo Twitter, around mid-April, the People's Oracle tweeted about not being able to hold space for her child, and the internet went off. So I read the thread and it seemed to me like she was saying that she was human and she can't always hold space for a child. Not that she doesn't try, but she can't do it 24/7, which makes sense to me. It was something that I understood, and I think a lot of the internet kind of went into the two polar opposites of that's abuse if you can't always hold space for your child, or there were people being like, my parents emotionally and physically neglected me and I turned out fine. So I wanted to talk about this idea of making space for Black children. Do you have any thoughts, Danny?
Yeah, I don't follow this person, but the tweet came on my timeline. People were upset. And for me, because I know how the internet works, people will make a thread, but a person will quote tweet the part of the thread that's gonna be cause the most outrage so they can look like they're like going off on the person. So I went and read the thread and I agree that it was a lot more nuanced, but I also see how the initial tweet was jarring because the initial tweet was kind of like, well, we don't have to go into it, but I know why some people immediately got triggered by that. Um, but as someone who has a complicated relationship with my own mother, like growing up, it doesn't change anything, but I had to recognize that my mom is a human outside of me, and it at least explains some of our what has happened over the course of my life and her life. So for me, I'm never gonna like diss a black parent or mother for saying that, like, fam, sometimes I can't do it, and it sounds bad, but it's like, it's already hard out here for black parents. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean that I'm not gonna hold parents accountable to what they do. But I also was like, y'all kind of doing a lot right now,
Mhm.
because she made a thread to clarify, and y'all still was like using that one tweet to just find an excuse to let off your feelings that you have about this, which is fine. Like, do your thing, but it was a lot happening.
Yeah, I agree. Like something that I saw and didn't like was kind of this idea that people had when they were talking about how Black parents have to experience racism, classism, and or sexism. But something that wasn't acknowledged is that kids have to face that too. Like we are we are Black kids who are girls who grew up in the South. Like we had to experience racism, classism, and sexism too. But so often we're asked to understand what our parents go through, but that isn't reciprocated towards us. Um, we had to experience a lot of the same things our parents did too, but as kids, we didn't have the fully developed brain. We didn't have, you know, emotional development and stuff. So it was like there needs to be an understanding of that too. Like I understand how hard it was for my parents. Like I'm the age my mother was when she had me, and I'm her third child. I cannot imagine having three kids right now. I can't imagine having one. So I understand that must be hard to be that in the South, but it's like I also want there to be an understanding of what it was like for me to grow up and deal with racism, with sexism, with classism as someone who did not have a fully developed brain. And I think that there's way to make space for both the harm that was done by our parents, but also make space for our parents who were harmed by society.
Yeah. And I also want to say, because I have friends that are parents, that even despite a lot of things that they are experiencing as predominantly Black women. Most of my friends that are parents are Black women. Um, they are. I even see the way they are like trying to reshape how we view Black parenting. That doesn't mean they're perfect. Some of them still spank their kids, not all of
Mhm.
them, but they also talk about like I want my kid to be able to talk to me and communicate with me. I, you know, the fact that I feel like all of my friends that have kids, their younger kids have, particularly little Black girls, have such big personalities.
Mhm.
And I remember my light got dimmed at a very young age. Um, and nobody really held emotional space for me. Like, I could not communicate if something was wrong. Um, I remember overhearing my grandma on the phone one time. I ended up getting put in like counseling when I was a young kid, but I overheard her telling my aunt like, "Oh, her teachers are concerned. They said like they've never seen a kid that young look so sad all the time."
Wow.
And yeah, because I was when I lived in Chicago, I lived in Chicago and went to school from up until second grade. So there was more resources there as far as like counseling and all that kind of stuff. Not saying ain't no resources here, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know it.
And so, but then to think that counseling was just going to fix me when it's like, if nobody else in my life is trying to do their part, of
Mhm.
course it didn't fix anything. Um, so there are consequences to that. And I do think that parents are human beings, but you also have way more power in the scenario. And someone had mentioned how children are an oppressed group, and people were like, "Huh? What? What are you talking about?" They da 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 da. Have Do you know that children literally have no power even over their bodies?
Mhm.
Y'all think y'all own y'all's children. If they don't want to hug somebody, you think it's cool to force a child to hug someone. If they're saying, I don't want this person to touch me, I don't want to sit on this person's lap, you literally have no power to advocate for yourself as a child.
Mhm.
Even down to force you to eat something, like I seen people talking about that too, making kids eat something that and they have sensory issues and you think they're being dramatic, and it's really like, no, it is painful for them to eat that thing because of the texture or whatever. So
It's hard. I know a mother. She's around my age. She's a couple years older than me. And something she always says is she does not have bad kids, which is just, it's such a simple statement, but it's just like, it blew my mind. Like every time her kids does something, she's like, I don't have bad kids. I don't have bad kids. Because growing up, I think pretty much all of it, unless we learn how to like shut up, be quiet, and do what we were told we were bad. And it just, I don't know. It was something about that that was just like, wow. And that's what I'm finding too. Like a lot of us are learning the language of kind of what our parents put us through. And so we're trying to not do the same thing because we're learning the consequences of that. And I think a lot of parents take offense when you say, you failed me, because they think that we are saying that they are bad parents and we're not. And then a lot of them will get defensive and be like, when I was a child, I didn't have X, Y, and Z, and you have all of these things and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, you were failed too. And so, of course, you're going to fail me because you can only give me what you were given. And if you were given failure, I'm going to get that failure too. Um, Now in my life, I'm trying to balance the idea that, my parents tried the best that they could in an oppressive system and they failed and their failures harmed me. So I'm trying to like hold space for the fact that they tried their best and I was still harmed. But that doesn't mean either of us are bad people. So yeah, I was listening to Therapy for Black Girls a while back, and they were talking about complex PTSD and societal neglect, and kind of how many Black people have complex PTSD. And I don't even know if it's PTSD because we're constantly dealing with trauma, the trauma of anti-Blackness, the trauma of patriarchy, the trauma of heteronormativity, the trauma of capitalism. We're constantly dealing with these traumas. But yeah, so something that the therapist said that was the way through all of this was love, because I know a lot of parents are like, the world's going to be hard on you, so I need to be harder. And it's like, when you do that, where does your child get softness from? And then how can you expect your child to want to be a part of this world if there's no softness in it?
Yeah. Um, I like what you said about the person who doesn't call their kids bad, because kids internalize literally everything you say to them. In therapy, I'm still processing through. You be amazed at what, when you grow up hating yourself or hating your body, what you remember. You remember that first time someone called you fat, or you remember that family member that said this, that, and the other to you. I remember so much of it because all of that shaped me. And now I'm in adulthood. Well, because I was a kid. Because I talk to my grandma about that now, about how my relationship to a lot of my family is complicated because I remember the shit that they would say to me. My brother remembers. We've had a conversation. They would say whatever they wanted to us as if we didn't hurt, like as if we didn't feel it, as if we were nothing. Um, so yeah, people have a real hard time believing that children are oppressed because people don't see children as fully, like, full humans, full people who should have autonomy. Like, that doesn't mean you don't guide them. That doesn't mean, like, of course you need to guide them. I done been a teenager. Ooh, imagine me not having no guidance, even now, you know? But I'm saying you should not be like
Mhm.
crushing their imagination, um dimming their light, telling them they're fat or they're this, or telling them to shut up when
Yes.
they ask questions. You know what I mean? And listening to them. I mean, I remember that when I was being harmed by someone and I tried to tell people, they would not believe me. They told me that I was lying. And I know so many people that experienced that as a kid, where you tried to say, this person is hurting me. I don't think this person was hurting me on purpose, but this person has something going on and I was being abused in the process. And nobody would listen to me. They did not start to believe it until they started reaping the consequences of whatever that person was going through. But when it's a kid, shut up. You're lying. Da 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 da. I'm still very resentful to that to this day. And this is why I say, believe children when they say something, even if it sounds crazy. Okay, talk them through it. What do you mean by this? Sometimes children, and I know this for myself, sometimes from when I was a kid, sometimes children create stories like, when you're super traumatized and you don't know how to put it into words, then you create something else that means, it's basically like, I don't want to say a riddle or something, but it's you trying to articulate your pain in a particular way. Um, and so it sounds like it doesn't make sense. But if you would just listen and talk them through it, then you'll get to what that child is experiencing. You know what I mean? But nobody wants to do that. They just want you to be, what they say, children are to be seen and not heard. That is actually a wretched, like,
Yeah.
that's horrible. But children aren't oppressed. Black children aren't oppressed, but y'all on the internet defending the police against a black girl who was a child. And y'all not recognizing that black teenagers are children is a whole nother thing, because that's all connected. They're babies. They are. Like, I don't like, so we don't even got to get that dark because I don't really want to talk about that. But I'm just saying, like, it reflects how people view children, that you can't even view them even as teenagers. You can't even have an ounce of empathy for black children.
And I even think for Black girls, I remember being in high school and there were like grown men going after Black girls, and everyone was like, "Oh, it's the girl who's doing this." And I'm like, "She's 15. How is she over here making a 40-year-old man want her?" I'm like, "She's 15."
And also, I want to say too, even if she is dealing with this 20, 40-year old, 30-year-old man, because I was a teenager, I had friends, you gonna put the mind of a 14, 15-year old that literally just
Mhm.
wants to feel loved above a grown ass man who is exploiting the fact that this child is looking for something, and they think that this is the way you get it. They think that this relationship or this person that they're gravitating to is equal, they're on equal standing, and they're not. This is why I don't like people calling teenage girls fast. I don't care if she is having sex, and I don't care if she's having sex with grown ass men. There is something totally different going on with this child than it is with a 40-year-old man that's going after a 14, that's willingly dealing with a 14 or 15-year-old. It's not the same. And you shouldn't call that child fast. You should ask what's going on with them. How can I support them? You know?
And that's something else I notice is that people are so willing to cast off, again, people they or children they view as bad, instead of being like, maybe something's wrong here. They're like, no, this child is a bad child. This child's not worth redemption. This child's not worth care or anything because they are bad, because they're doing something that I don't agree with. And instead of being like, well, why are they doing that thing? It's just like, no, they're bad.
This is what I be talking about, like with people expecting children to have the emotional maturity, when y'all be like 32 and you don't even know how to manage your emotions correctly. But you think that a 13, 14-year old should know how to. It's just so much. But yeah, I think that we need to pay attention to children more. They're super intuitive. Um, they be seeing spirits until y'all tell them that they shouldn't be. Um, and they deserve autonomy. That doesn't, like, that's not knocking your authority as a parent. I also want to mention this briefly. I didn't really dig into the Kurt Franklin thing. Did we talk about that ever on the show, or we didn't really talk
I
about
don't
it?
think we did.
But I remember maybe on the read, I be getting some of my news from them. I don't even want to look it up. Thank y'all for recounting this. But she had mentioned, Crystal had mentioned that Kurt Franklin said something along the lines of like, I love my son, but he's not my equal. And you know, a lot of parents have that mentality. And I want to say to the parents that have that, who the hell do you think you are?
Ooh.
When your child is always your equal from birth. Your child is a human being. They came into this earth in the same, through a similar process as you. And it doesn't matter that they're a child. To say essentially that your child is beneath you, that's outrageous. It's heinous. And so I don't trust nothing you got to say about this man. Is he disrespectful? Maybe he is, but I'm just seeing it as a reflection of however y'all have treated him, treated a child, to say they're not your equal. Having authority over someone, or being a caregiver until someone, does not mean that they are beneath you, whether it's a child or somebody
Mhm.
else. And that's really like the main issue. And I think it's very, um I don't really, white people do whatever they doing. We talking about black people right now. Black people have a real problem with that, with thinking that their children are beneath them. And I just think that's wild. That's wild. That's a wild thing to say or feel.
Especially when a lot of the children are your ancestors coming
Listen,
back to
girl,
you.
you know they don't believe that, but I'm just like, listen, some of these kids done been here before because the way they be looking. My nephew, oh my gosh, I can't wait to meet him. I only see pictures, but honestly, my nephew looked like, here we go again. Some of his pictures just look like, well, here I go again, back to the bullshit.
Also, it's like people admit that when they say that about kids, like, "Oh, this kid's been here before," and I'm like, "So you are
They
admitting?"
don't even know. They don't even know where the sayings come from. They just say it. See? Well, did you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I don't want to get too dark, but I just do want to say listen to kids because 9 times out of 10 they're not lying to you and they just want to be heard, they want to be validated, supported. I am very happy to see at least my peers who are having kids to see the different way that they're being raised because I think a lot of us are acknowledging the harm in the way that we have been raised. But my hope is that for the people who raised us, like the Black Gen X, and that they get some support, some therapy, some guidance, because a lot of them think that they raised us fine. And I'm like, 6 therapy sessions a month is not fine. I am not fine. So yeah, I want us to get better at parenting. And I know we're not going to be perfect. Like I talk about this with my therapist. That's one reason why I'm still not a parent because I understand how hard it is, especially now in the society that we have. We don't have this, huge family under one roof where everyone's taking care of a child. We have like maybe a mother maybe a mother and a father, who knows what kind of family it is. But yeah, so there's not a lot of support, and that's a bigger conversation. There's not a lot of support for when you have children, and so the options that parents can give their child decrease significantly because of that. So yeah, it's hard. Being a parent is hard, but I hope that y'all are nicer to your
Yeah,
children.
I think I think we can hold space for the humanity of parents and the humanity of children.
Yes.
Parents do not have dominion over their children, nor are they superior to them. You are emotionally, physically, in some cases, psychologically more developed than that child, but you shouldn't see a child as beneath you. Um, I don't think that's everybody, but I think there's a certain genre of people. We know who they mostly are. We ain't even gotta say it. That feel that way about their children, and they try to and they try to like use like spiritual biblical stuff to justify it. And that's your business, but you're wrong. So that's all I got.
Yeah. Amen.
The children are the future. Amen. All right. Well, if you like this episode, you can like, rate, and review Hoodoo Plant Mamas on Apple Podcasts. Go ahead and give us those 5 stars. If you leave a review on Apple Podcasts, we'll make sure to share it on the show.
If anything from the show resonated with you, make sure to share it with us on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Hoodoo Plants and Instagram at Hoodoo Plant Mamas. Stay tuned for our next episode, which is our season finale.
It's going to be fun. All right. Bye,
Yes.
y'all.
Bye.